Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today, I'm really excited to share with you a conversation I had with Dr. Eben Alexander. This is from the archives. The interview took place a number of years ago, but we're talking about Dr. Alexander's near-death experience and the book he wrote about it called Proof of Heaven. It's a fascinating conversation, and I know you'll enjoy it. Be sure to subscribe down below if you haven't already. Also, subscribe and leave a rating and review for the podcast wherever you happen to listen. And go to eoluniversity.com/support. And there you'll find 3 different ways you can make a small contribution to help keep this channel and the podcast on the air. So thank you if you choose to do that. And we'll move on now with my conversation with Dr. Eben Alexander. Hello and welcome to this special keynote presentation for Death Expo. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt, the author of What Really Matters, and I'm so pleased today that you're here joining us in this conversation to listen to this very special guest that we're bringing you today, Dr. Eben Alexander. And our topic today is going to be on the afterlife, which has really become a topic that I'm hearing about everywhere I go now. I think the time is right for us to begin to open up this discussion, and Dr. Alexander and his work have been key in bringing this subject to the forefront. So let me tell you a little bit more about Dr. Alexander before we go into our conversation. He's the best-selling author of Proof of Heaven, A Neurosurgeon's Journey in the Afterlife. Dr. Alexander has been an academic neurosurgeon for over 25 years, including 15 years at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, the Children's Hospital, and Harvard Medical School. In 2008, his own remarkable near-death experience radically transformed his understanding of consciousness and the brain. Dr. Alexander co-founded the nonprofit Eternia to share this information, to further the research on science and spirituality and the nature of consciousness, and to encourage people to bring unconditional love into daily life. He is currently touring with his recently released second book, Map of Heaven: How Science, Religion, and Ordinary People Are Proving the Afterlife. And when he's not speaking or conducting research, Dr. Alexander enjoys hiking, climbing, scuba diving, snow skiing, tennis, and meditation. And for more information, you can go to his website at ebenalexander.com. So Dr. Alexander, I want to start by thanking you for taking the time out to be here today. I know that you're extremely busy, for one thing, because you're touring with your new book right now, but I know you're in a lot of demand everywhere as a speaker, and so I'm grateful that you're giving us your time. And I want to say even more so, I'm very grateful that you survived your coma and your critical life-threatening situation back in 2008, and that you are using that experience in such a beautiful way to help other people. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. Obviously, this is an audience that is right in line with kind of the core part of my message about this. So it's a real joy to be here with you today.
Yes, I've been very excited to delve into more of a discussion of the afterlife. In a lot of my interviews have focused just on the dying process itself, and I feel like we really need in the hospice world and the end-of-life world to think about the afterlife so that we're seeing the big picture. And as you and I discussed before we started this call, the very success of your book, Proof of Heaven, is actually proof that the world is really ready for this discussion. You were saying Proof of Heaven has been on the bestseller list for 2 years now?
Yes, it surprised me because it hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list the first week it came out. And I knew that someday it would do well, but I was shocked how quickly it rocketed to the top. And again, to me, that's very much a testimonial to this world and how advanced and enlightened this world is. more so than to the book itself. I think if I had written Proof of Heaven 15 years ago, it probably would have hit an absolute wall. So I'm very grateful to the courageous souls who have been out there, talking about the science of consciousness and how we are coming to a much deeper understanding of the fundamental basis of spirituality as it greatly contributes to the maturing of science. That science that I had worshipped before my coma, pure scientific materialism that pretends that there's no such thing as consciousness, soul, or spirit, that science is going extinct, that pure materialist view. And science is now getting to a point where it's greatly expanding its boundaries to fully embrace the truth and the concrete reality of consciousness, soul, spirit, and in fact the divine within us all.
Well, it strikes me that you were, in so many ways, the perfect person to have this encounter, this near-death experience that you had, just because you were skeptical and agnostic and as you said, worshiping scientific materialism before this event happened. And so of all the people who has a credible voice now, you have come from the opposite camp in a way and had your mind completely opened and awakened to new possibilities. And so for me, that makes you an even more credible champion for this message.
Well, I think it's important to point out my near-death experience of, very profound and powerful is like thousands of other near-death experiences out there. And in fact, what I bring up in the second book, The Map of Heaven, is what a gift it has been to me to go around sharing my story, mainly because others share their stories with me. And if I give a talk to 200 or 300 people, I'll often have, 5 or 10 of them come up afterwards and say, I never told anybody this, but. And then they tell me a story that when you come to realize the truth behind it and the similarities behind all these stories is shocking, the truth behind it is so profound it could change the world. So these stories are out there by the millions. And, I know full well that, having an MD and being, spending 15 years at Harvard Medical School, all of that means something in this world. But I promise you, where I went on my journey, those things don't mean squat. They don't, MD, Harvard Med School, who cares? In that realm, it's much more profoundly about the journey of a soul. And I know that there are thousands of stories that I've been told by other souls that to me are, as profound as mine. And that's what Proof of Heaven really has the power to do, is take the lid off and let millions of others share their stories of very real encounters with the spiritual realm. And that's how we will take our culture back into a full knowing of the reality of God and the divine and of that whole spiritual realm and the eternity of souls. It's something that's right at the cutting edge of science even as we speak, as we get deeper and deeper into understanding consciousness and the relationship between mind and brain. It becomes very clear to those who go deeply enough in that scientific journey of understanding consciousness that they come to realize the brain does not produce consciousness at all. It does not create it. It's simply a reducing valve or filter that allows it in. Consciousness preexists the entire universe, and that realization is now coming up very strongly in scientific circles. And that's how this world will change, is through the shift in science and the awakening to the truth behind these journeys by the millions that are out there in the populace. And, of course, these stories have been there in similar fashion for thousands of years. But it's really due to our scientific materialism of the 20th century that we started losing sight of the fact that that very real realm, much more real than this one, truly exists. And this is what near-death experiences have been trying to say for thousands of years. So that reality is now coming back into the depths of our scientific investigation of mind, brain, and consciousness.
I'm reading your second book, Map of Heaven, right now, and so I've been impressed with just the volume. And I'm sure you've shared only a small percentage of all the letters that you've received from people since Proof of Heaven came out. But it's so clear to me that all of these people who have had near-death experiences in the past are now being validated by your book and reading your book and saying, yes, this happened to me. And they finally have the courage to be able to talk about it and to tell other people and to even allow this profound experience they've had to change them and to recognize how important and special it's been in their lives.
Yeah, so I think that is certainly one aspect of Proof of Heaven, that it helps to take the lid off and let so many others share their stories. It's such a different world, much more real than this one, and yet when you come back from there, it's so kind of shocking that people are not necessarily willing to talk about it, especially the way our culture has been in recent decades. They worry that they would be thought kind of crazy. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, doctors would try and tell you, well, this was a sign of mental illness that was associated with whatever drove them into coma or gave them a near-death experience in the first place. And so I'm very gratified that I'm often asked to speak at medical schools and nursing schools and in front of surgical groups, et cetera, because by helping to change the healthcare profession, and that certainly includes the hospice community, into recognizing the reality of these journeys, then the healthcare professionals that are involved can help to invite these stories, not just from near-death experiencers, but from those who are present at the passage of a loved one. Some of those people actually enjoy what's called a shared death experience, where even though they're physiologically normal and healthy, their soul can get taken along on the journey with the departing soul of the loved one who is leaving the physical body once and for all. And those shared death experiences are really powerful, and I hear one of those every few weeks in my talks, and that is something that was brought to the world, the whole concept of a shared death experience, by Dr. Raymond Moody in his beautiful book in 2011, Glimpses of Eternity, which is all about normal people who are at the bedside of departing souls, whose souls get taken along on the journey, even to the point of witnessing a full-blown life review, and then the bystander soul coming back to this world to tell the story. And those shared death experiences completely demolish the simplistic kindergarten-level thinking of modern, or I should say conventional scientific viewpoints that say, oh, well, the dark light is because, the dark tunnel is because of this, the bright light is because of that in the brain. And those pseudo-explanations from the medical and scientific community don't even remotely hold a candle to being able to describe the full richness of deep, transcendental near-death experiences. So it's all about this world waking up to the reality of that realm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm interested. It's so clear that your work is really being embraced by the general public, but I've been curious how you have been received in medical circles, and I ask about it. You and I come from the same era. We were both in medical school at about the same time, and when my first day of medical school, I have a vivid memory of being asked to talk about why I was there, and I said in front of all my classmates and professors, well, I believe that love is the most powerful healing force there is. And I remember the looks on the faces of everyone around me, and I suddenly realized that I cannot share this. I can't share what I think and how I see things with these people. They do not appreciate this at all, and I kind of went under the radar at that point. So I'm really curious about what kind of reception you're getting from medical professionals as you go out talking about your work.
Well, I would say that you were way ahead of your time because my journey, as I describe in Proof of Heaven and in Map of Heaven, as a healer, as a surgeon, I came back from this realizing that unconditional love that I witnessed on my journey, that so many others, millions and millions who have had similar spiritually transformative experiences, have seen, come to know and feel the power of that unconditional love of the Creator for the creation. And I came back realizing full well that we all have the capacity to share healing in very profound ways by serving as conduits for that unconditional love and bringing it into this world, loving ourselves, which I also came to realize was a major problem in this world, is that we don't love ourselves enough. We might think we do, but not loving ourselves as those eternal spiritual beings that are far more powerful than just, the little birth to death in a physical body that we might think of. But we have far greater power than that by acknowledging our true eternal spiritual self and the connectedness that our souls share with other souls around us. In fact, that we're here to manifest that unconditional love for all fellow beings. The more we can do that, the more direct our pathway of ascendance towards that oneness with the divine. But it really is all about healing. And we heal others, and in doing that, heal ourselves. So by healing others and passing that love on to others, that's how we come to know and feel that love most powerfully in our own right and in our existence. And so in essence, you were right on the beam there with your knowing that first day in medical school about love and the power it has to heal. Now, I will say that I'm very gratified, as I mentioned a minute ago, that I'm asked to talk at medical schools, nursing schools, in front of surgical groups and other physician groups, including, some annual lectureships and things like that. It's because they understand where this is going and the truth behind this. They understand that the science, if they're deeply into the mind-body discussion and the cutting edge of scientific discoveries trying to come to better resolution of the enigma of quantum mechanics, what's called the measurement problem, that very deeply calls the profound role of consciousness in all of evolving reality. And yet the physics community has been very slow to come around with any kind of interpretation of quantum mechanics to make sense of that. And yet I think a lot of those in medicine and in nursing science, et cetera, come to realize how this is a much deeper understanding of our world and of the essence of soul, and the reality of the afterlife is something that the scientific community is coming to accept. Again, mainly focused around consciousness and that whole mind-body discussion that's been going on for 2,600 years. We're finally making some true headway in all of that, and modern science does bring something to the table that's very important. But ironically, it's basically the materialists in their efforts to come up with a theory of everything, whether that be approaches through string theory or quantum gravity, trying to blend relativity and quantum physics together. But the essence is that the materialists are the first to tell you that there's no material to the material world. It's vibrating strings of energy in a higher dimensional space-time or something, or as Sir James Dean said, the universe begins to look much more like a great thought than a great machine. And mind and consciousness should be regarded as creator and governor of this realm. And that is really where we're headed, is to a much more profound scientific understanding of what is truly going on with mind, brain, consciousness, and realizing that since the physical brain does not create consciousness at all, that in fact that leaves open the far grander possibilities of eternity of soul and our connectedness as conscious beings with each other, with all of life, life beyond the bounds of earth, and with the divine. And luckily, a lot of those in scientific and medical circles get this at a deep level, where this is headed. And so I'm gratified by invitations to speak at, to medical and scientific groups about every bit of this.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that there is some openness there, because I feel that that's the direction we need to move our thinking in medicine toward, because I feel that a lot of the problems we have in our current healthcare system are related to this reductionistic materialism that with which we just view the body. We view health as a physical body that we can manipulate and adapt and give drugs to, instead of viewing the entire being, the reality of consciousness and the soul as manifested through this physical body.
Right. Well, my role as a healer shifted totally with the realizations I gained from my journey, and especially in the months after my journey, trying to make sense of it. And I've come to see that each and every one of us is truly an eternal spiritual being. And in fact, I feel I can function best as a healer when I can step back far enough to see individual souls and their soul groups and interwoven in this beautiful tapestry. And that includes realizing full well that reincarnation is a huge part of this. Of course, being a materialist scientist, I'd never paid attention to the scientific literature on reincarnation before my coma, but you can bet after my coma I've paid tremendous attention to every bit of that, because it helps us to understand the deeper message about who we are and what consciousness is and what soul and spirit are. And past life memories in children is really a very profound database. I know the researchers at University of Virginia, beginning with Ian Stevenson, now with Jim Tucker, have researched more than 2,500 cases of very profound past life memories in children that really have no other explanation. And this is kind of a deeper aspect of understanding consciousness, soul, spirit, and who we are, is coming to recognize some of that scientific literature that's out there supporting all this. And no question, past life memories in children completely demolishes that simplistic little view that I had before my coma, that brain creates consciousness, that it's birth to death and nothing more, and that as conventional neuroscience proudly says, none of us have free will. You know, that neuroscience says that given that consciousness is an illusion created by the physical meanderings of subatomic particles, atoms, molecules, cells of the brain, in fact, that conventional neuroscience tries to dismiss consciousness as not even really existing, and also similarly to dismiss free will, because it's all just those natural laws of the physical substance of our brains giving an illusion of free will. I now realize that viewpoint is completely wrong. That in fact, I believe the whole reason for existence for this universe is to allow sentient beings to come into these physical incarnations temporarily dumbed down on this side of the veil, not having the knowledge that our higher souls do between lives. And that this is part of that much deeper understanding. It certainly helps the scientific community that wrestling with that brain-body, the mind-body discussion and the nature of consciousness, to come to deeper terms of it, to realize that consciousness, soul, spirit is actually liberated from the shackles of the physical brain at the time of bodily death. That's what near-death experiencers have been trying to tell us for thousands of years, and especially in the last 5 or 6 decades, since doctors discovered means of bringing back cardiac arrest patients and basically populating this world with millions who had been to the other side and now come back to tell the tale.
Well, yeah, I think that's just fascinating, and it's obvious that we've really just glimpsed the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, and that in the coming years there will probably be so many more stories that we will be hearing about, but also so much more knowledge and understanding that we're going to have about past lives and about the nature of consciousness and the divine realms around us. But I was wondering if you, during the feedback you're getting and the responses you're getting from all of your readers for your books, have people talk to you about the impact your writing has had on their experience of grief when they're dealing with losing someone?
Well, yes. In fact, I first started giving talks about my experience about 2.5 years before Proof of Heaven came out. And the very first talk I gave, which was in April of 2010, was to a fundraising dinner for a group called Kids Haven. That is a group based in Lynchburg, Virginia. And what had happened is there were several families that were good friends of ours in Lynchburg who had lost a child. And I would talk with some of those families informally, just as a friend, about my experience. And word got out that they were getting tremendous benefit from conversations with me. And so that's what really led to that first talk that I gave, was to help raise funds for that group, to support their efforts. And Kids Haven was there to help children who had either lost a sibling or lost a parent, to help them in their grieving process. So that was really, it was in that tough environment of families that had lost children that I got my start in giving these presentations. And I've now given more than 230 such presentations to many different groups all around the world. And right at the core of it, I think, is trying to help souls who are bereaved, who are dealing with the loss of a loved one who has left the physical plane, and trying to help them to come to recognize that our souls are eternal, that in fact they can still communicate with the soul of the departed loved one, and in fact can do so in ways where they will be often given proof that this is a real-time, active communication from a soul on the other side. And this, of course, is important because this is how we often get important information concerning our own health or concerning our own soul journey in ways that often comes with an imprimatur that shows that this is an active intervention in our life from the soul of a departed loved one on the other side, giving us information we need to live our lives now. And by opening people to this possibility, I think it does a great service for them. One of the best books out there that I often recommend to people along these lines is a book by a very close friend of mine, Bill Guggenheim, and he co-wrote this with his former wife, Judy Guggenheim. It's called Hello from Heaven. It came out back in the mid-1990s. It's a wonderful book about after-death communication. And I think it is also very helpful to those who are bereaved to help them to come to see that when you are open to it, often you can get that message from the soul of the departed loved one about the other side. And they will share, as people often tell me, the greatest gift they get from their mother or father or maybe a sibling or a child who passed over before them is evidence, very strong evidence of the reality of that realm, and that soul passing over is in perfectly good health and shape on that other side. And I think that's very comforting to people to get that. But it's important to open oneself to be available to receive that message. And it often comes when the loved one is making the transition. And, of course, your work in hospice, and I imagine you've probably seen that many times yourself. I know many in the nursing community. I often credit the nurses with having gotten this long before I did. I can't speak for other doctors, but I needed an extra thumping, in the form of my meningitis to actually see the reality of our eternal soul. But many in the nursing community, and certainly in hospice, have seen evidence of this themselves. When a patient leaves the physical plane, when the physical body dies, they see something there that shows them the soul lives on. And so many others out there, just lay people who've been at the bedside, when a loved one leaves their physical body once and for all, they see the evidence of the same thing. And, of course, there's stories like that in Map of Heaven. I hear stories like that all the time. And it's a beautiful thing to share. this is what our culture needs to reawaken to.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to just to tell you, well, in my own life experience, my father committed suicide 25 years ago, and in spite of my spiritual beliefs and my own beliefs in consciousness at the time, I had a really difficult time with grief, my own grief over his death. And I realized that some part of it was that there's a societal stigma about suicide, but then even religious stigma, and that I was receiving messages from the religious community that, well, now my father would be condemned because he took his own life. And even though I don't ascribe to those religions, I would say that took a toll on me. And I loved reading in your book when you described that the afterlife is all loving. It's all loving, and there is no condemnation. That even though I believe it for myself, it's nice to have that validation. And I was thinking that I'm sure there are other people grappling with suicide out there who really need that reassurance and that message.
Well, there are, and I think it's important to point out, that old saying, your life flashes before your eyes. Well, guess what? That's absolutely what happens. And, of course, near-death experiencers have been telling us for ages that you go through a life review. The life review is a very important thing to understand. In essence, it helped me to realize, as I came back from my journey, I knew that there was no eternal hell and damnation. I mean, that's basically what was shown to me is we don't have an eternal hell because God and this universe he's created is for us to learn, to teach and learn these beautiful lessons of love. And so there would never be eternal damnation for certain souls. It's much more a soul school where we're here to learn from all of these adventures of life. Now, in the case of suicide, what that really means is that the first thing that a suicide comes to realize is the tremendous power and depth of love that is there for them, not only from that all-powerful deity, but also from the loving souls that were in this life that they left behind by committing suicide. So, in essence, suicide provides a very rich and profound life review in which the first thing that becomes very clear is that that departing soul of the loved one who has committed suicide was indeed deeply loved, far more than they would have been aware of, to enable them to even commit suicide. Now, to strengthen what I'm saying here, I would like to share what Dr. Raymond Moody, he's become a very close friend. He and I often present together. In fact, I was with him just a few days ago in Asheville, North Carolina, or Hendersonville at Canoga, presenting. And I remember presenting with Dr. Moody several months ago in the Bahamas, and he shared with me a very interesting observation about suicide. And he said this is one of the few things that he can say with, basically 100% assurance when he looks back over his 50-year career of looking at near-death experiences and those who've been to the other side and come back. And here's the way he put it, that in all those decades of research, in every case of which he's aware, if someone who attempted suicide actually had a near-death experience, that is, they had some of those memories of love, maybe of going through a dark tunnel, of seeing souls of departed loved ones, and of getting that beautiful message of the divine, the power of that infinitely divine God, and of that unconditional love. Any aspect of those facets of a near-death experience that were presented to them and came back to this world, that if an attempted suicide case had such experience, even though it may have been just minimal elements of an NDE, that they never attempted suicide again. And I think that's the important take-home from this. What struck Dr. Moody, and if my interpretation of what he told me is correct, is that those who had the near-death experience as part of their suicide attempt, they never tried to attempt suicide again. And the reason that's important is because it tells us what the message is, not just for those who attempted suicide but then came back to this world, but for those who attempted suicide and were successful, is that they saw that infinite love. They saw the love of the others around them, of their soul beings, a love that they may not have perceived before their suicide attempt. But by witnessing even just a glimpse of that love, they never tried to attempt suicide again. And as I'm sure you're aware, for the general population of those who attempt suicide out there, if they don't have an NDE, if they just attempt suicide and then come back, it's not uncommon for them to attempt suicide again. And unfortunately, many times they may be successful in a second or third attempt. And so crucial to get that what they are seeing in that life review is the full-blown power of that love, of others for them and of the divine for them. And in essence, this is telling us that what they are going through is a very deep aspect of a dark night of the soul, of depression and what have you, that is trying to teach us and our soulmates or their particular soul group the infinite love of that Creator, and that the love that we have access to here on earth for each other can easily overcome the kind of depths of darkness and depression that often lead to suicide, if we're only open to coming to know it in this incarnation. Mm-hmm. And given that I came to realize that all the hardships and difficulties in our lives, and that certainly includes illness and injury that I see as a healer, but these are all gifts. They're opportunities for growth. If our souls can come to realize that in the, embracing the lessons around the darkness of that walk deep in the valley of that shadow of death and of other darkness and depression that accosts us in these incarnations, if we're willing to learn those lessons that will allow us to walk up on that ridge in beautiful light and love from having learned those lessons that we're here to learn, then there really is no darkness that is so overwhelming and no apparent evil that is so dark that it would drag us down. If we are able to remember the infinite healing power of that unconditional love, and that we are all truly deserving of that love by being eternal spiritual beings that at our deepest consciousness are connected to each other and to the divine. And that is such a huge part of the lesson in both Proof of Heaven and the Map of Heaven for each and every one of us to take with us on this journey. Mm-hmm. And I hope that helps you understand about how I view suicide and how I view the deep love that it is here to teach us and the deep connectedness it is here to teach us, and help remind those souls that are in that darkness to remember their connection to the divine and to the infinite healing power of that divine, all-loving source.
And I think it's definitely helpful for the survivors who've lost someone to a suicide, because you do get plunged into your own dark night of the soul when you're grieving that kind of loss. And yet it's also part of the process of growth. And in my case, it was my grief over my dad's death that led me to hospice work. I was a family practice physician and finally decided maybe I should try working in hospice and immersing myself in death and dying as a way of healing my own grief. And in fact, I got to hospice and found out this is where I've belonged all along. This is where I was meant to be. So it was clear that event that was so traumatic and really shattering for my entire family actually had in it the seeds of the transformation that each one of us needed to make. It took a while. It took a while to make the transformation, but it was
right.
Ultimately led us there.
It does. Well, I think you're exactly right, and that is part of your soul's journey, to have been thrust into that darkness, into the unfathomable depths of having a loved one so close to you take their own life. And so I want to congratulate you on being able to wrestle with that darkness and the depths of what that must have involved to rise above it and get the lessons from that beautiful light and of that love. And in hospice, when we are truly honored to be at the side of those who are leaving this physical incarnation, and that's why it's so important as part of this journey of all souls together to share the gifts that come from that. And that's why my hat is off to hospice workers and to nurses and doctors everywhere who are willing to help, bring these stories out, help to let people share. And I'm not just talking here about near-death experiences, shared death experiences, but, after-death communication, deathbed visitations, those who are at the bedside when loved ones pass over often get these beautiful gifts. And that's what we're all here to share, to help wake this world up and bring us all back into that much deeper sense of connectedness, and that this is about so much more than just what happens when we die. It's all about how we are to live our lives. How can we fully live a life here unless we have a deeper understanding of who we are and the full extent of this? To me, if I were still harboring that birth to death and nothing more, I could hardly have the kind of vision and understanding about how best to live my life here that I do. And that's why I think it's so important to share. And this is really about all of our existence, not just about, what to expect when you leave your physical body once and for all. It's a far deeper kind of challenge and opportunity to us to come to a much deeper understanding of the nature of our existence. And that's one reason why I'm such a big fan of meditation. And, the book Map of Heaven in many ways is kind of a clarion call to all to go within. As I say in the appendix of Map of Heaven, the answers lie within us all. And deep meditation, centering prayer, sometimes it comes unbidden as the gift of desperation, but we're all as conscious beings, we have access to coming to a much deeper understanding of the nature of consciousness and of all existence and of who we are by going within. And that's why I do the work I do with sacred acoustics. As I mentioned in Map of Heaven in that appendix, those who want to go more deeply into meditation can check out sacredacoustics.com and learn more about how sound can engender very deep transcendental conscious states to help us all come closer to this knowing.
I think that's wonderful to recommend practices that people can use, because I think, first of all, it's important that we wake up and become aware of our own consciousness, but beyond that, we all need to practice in our daily lives in order to deepen our experience of it, because we have minds that are not used to this, not used to the process of connecting with the divine and with higher realms. So I think that it's just practical to recommend that we do need to work at it. We do need to take time every day to practice.
Yes, absolutely. And it took me about 2 years after my coma to really start getting deeply into the power of exploring consciousness to come to understand it more fully. I now try and meditate an hour or two a day. If I have extra time, I'll try and put in 3 or 4 hours, because a long, deep meditation for me is a perfect way to get right back into those very realms that I visited and described in the book Proof of Heaven about my coma journey back in 2008. And the reality is you don't have to die or almost die to get there. By being a conscious being, a deeper knowing of it is available to all of us. And again, that's why I am such a major proponent of meditation. And if you already have a form of deep meditation or centering prayer, fine, go with it. For those out there who say, well, I can't meditate, I have too much of a monkey mind, that little voice in my head chattering away, well, that's where the sacred acoustic sounds can be very powerful and can help to turn that little monkey mind off. I often remind people in my presentations, the little voice in my head is not my consciousness. I know that fully well. And as a neurosurgeon, I'll tell you, the little voice in your head is little more than a very tiny part of your brain that puts together, words of thoughts and spoken words. And there's a similar sized area, very small. Both of these are in our dominant hemisphere, and most right-handed people on the left side. And this other little region is where it's called Wernicke's area. It's where we put together definitions and kind of the false boundaries of our linguistic brain. Remember that linguistic brain, the voice in our head, is very tightly tied with ego and with notions of self. And, of course, the ego has two tools to kind of guide us and cajole us. The ego uses anxiety about the past and fear about the future to kind of drive our behavior. And I often point out that the true magic of consciousness, the real deep mystery of consciousness, is really the awareness, the observer. And with meditation, we can cultivate that awareness within self and also allow it to, that little voice in our head can make state an intention, make a request, offer up some gratitude, because gratitude, as I point out in Proof of Heaven, is really the only appropriate response to any of this miracle of our existence. But then that little voice goes into timeout. And there is far greater wisdom for us to have access to, our awareness, the observer, that's the true mystery of consciousness within us. And that's where meditation comes in handy. It allows that observer self of our true consciousness to come to a much deeper knowing of who we are and to come into much better guidance and to come in touch with that divinity. And in long meditation, for me, a form of centering prayer, I focus deeply on that infinitely healing and loving God, that unconditionally loving God at the core of consciousness, and of the connectedness of all souls as one conscious being. To me, in meditation, I come very much in touch with that. And that's what others can do, too, to come to know the truth of this long before they face leaving their physical body once and for all.
Well, I wonder, Dr. Alexander, from this part of our conversation, I would imagine that you would probably recommend meditation for our colleagues in medicine, for physicians, too, because I have some concerns about our medical system and where it's headed in some ways, because I find more and more emphasis on technology, and I'm very concerned about the lack of awareness within medicine of the soul. And I feel like some of our overspending at the end of life and over-treating patients comes from the fact that if you don't believe there's anything more than this physical existence, then you will put all your energy into just this physical body. But if you can see a much bigger picture, it's much easier to let go. And anyway, I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts about what changes do we need to make within our healthcare system, within the way doctors think and doctors operate, to improve the care we're giving to people?
Yeah, well, I think that's a very, very good point. I would like to share a little story about when I was first going into neurosurgery in medical school as a resident. I was very impressed with the technical fortitude of various neurosurgeons in the operating room, their incredible expertise, technically as skilled surgeons. And I remember asking my father. My father had a deep spiritual side. He always knew that God was at the core of any healing of patients that he had. It was his role as a neurosurgeon was very small in any recovery, but it was God's healing hand. He knew that completely. He never doubted it. And I've known other surgeons and physicians through my career who had a very strong faith in God, who knew the power of prayer. And so I think that there are many out there, and in fact I feel that those in medicine and nursing, that more and more of them are coming to realize that we're eternal spiritual beings. They're coming to realize the afterlife is real and the power of prayer. But there are those, as you point out, who are still mired down and stuck worshiping that pure scientific materialism that I worship before my coma. I do not use that term lightly because, in fact, that pure scientific materialism that denies that there's any such thing as consciousness, soul, or spirit, that says that all of that is an epiphenomenon of the physical workings of the subatomic particles, atoms, molecules in the brain, that is false. And there are those out there who still believe that. And so what I urge those in the medical community is to entertain the realities presented in Proof of Heaven and especially in the Map of Heaven. Both of those books are a call to the skeptic, to the true open-minded skeptic. In fact, that's who I wrote those books for, were the open-minded skeptics who were very well-read modern scientific thinkers, to help them come to realize that one of the biggest smoke and mirrors tricks out there in our world is scientific materialism's attempt to convey that they have any understanding at all about consciousness, brain, and mind. Because, in fact, there is something there called the hard problem of consciousness. And I would say that is the deepest conundrum known to all of human thought, even though, truth be told, even with more than 15 years' experience at Harvard Medical School, I'd never even heard of the hard problem of consciousness. And it is really that deep mystery surrounding efforts by modern neuroscience to explain how the physical brain might give rise to consciousness. In fact, the truth is, no one on earth who studies the brain and mind, philosophy of mind, or neuroscience of brain, no one on earth can give even the first sentence to try and explain how the physical brain might give rise to consciousness. That is very crucial. The more people who study brain, mind, and consciousness get deeply into it, as they learn to really appreciate the depths of the challenge, they end up crossing over and they leave that pure materialism behind because it is hopelessly lost. That pure scientific materialism is a very primitive, simplistic kindergarten-level thinking that sooner or later hits the wall where it realizes, well, the physical brain does not create consciousness at all. And this is where all of modern neuroscience and philosophy of mind is headed. It's about time. This is really all about the 2,600-year-old mind-body debate, as it's called. And it is about so much more than just mind, body, and consciousness when you come to realize that the only thing any one of us truly knows to exist is our own consciousness. Our conventional neuroscience would remind you that all that you've ever thought or known or experienced, falling in love, beautiful symphony, lovely sunset, every bit of it going back to before you were born was nothing more than the electrochemical flickering of 100 billion neurons in a 3-pound gelatinous mass floating in a warm, dark bath, a model of reality, a model of that external world, not external reality itself. And as you start to wrestle through all this, you start to realize that consciousness is actually the most fundamental, profound thing to understand in this universe. And for anyone out there who is proposing some kind of theory of everything, they have to start with a far more robust understanding of what consciousness is before they can even begin to discuss the nature of reality. This is what I point out in Map of Heaven. Some physicists like Roger Penrose, Henry Stapp, Amit Goswami, and Brian Josephson have risen to the plate to try and take physics much more deeply down into this understanding of consciousness. But most of the physics community is clueless as to the rigors demanded, and it drove founding fathers of quantum mechanics into mysticism to even begin to understand that enigma of quantum mechanics and where it's going. But this is all about a deeper understanding, broadening the boundaries of science to a far richer knowing of the nature of all existence. And it all begins with a deeper understanding of consciousness. This is what I point out in the book Map of Heaven as an extension beyond the challenge presented in Proof of Heaven. And as the whole modern medical community and scientific community awakens to all of this, we will begin to see the true nature of the eternal spiritual being that each and every one of us is, our interconnectedness as parts of that greater spiritual existence, and how all of consciousness truly is one. And I think as those in medicine begin to fully address the deep mysteries presented here and come closer to that deeper truth presented around the nature of our soul and spirit and consciousness, we will begin to have a far richer role in true healing, because you cannot see healing when you limit the sense of healing to the physical, the mental, the emotional. But it really needs to expand to encompass the spiritual nature of each and every one of us, the spiritual journeys that our soul groups are on, and how these hardships and difficulties that may manifest as illness or injury are all opportunities for growth of our soul groups, and learning how to manifest that love, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and mercy from the divine creator is what we do in the process of healing in all senses of the word. This is all about healing in a far grander sense than I ever recognized before.
That's just beautiful, and what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that medical providers will wake up because everyone on our planet is waking up. That is going to happen more and more. It is right now in front of us, and I'm really glad for this conversation. I'm glad that we can put information out there so that those who are waking up and who are considering new ideas and opening their minds and seeing things they've never seen before know that they're not alone, and know that there are those who've gone before them, and they can find a place where they feel supported and validated in the experiences that they're having.
Well, I think that's very true, and the world is waking up to this, and the more we can share this around this world. That's why I was so gratified that Proof of Heaven is now out in 43 countries. And it's beyond any apparent boundaries of a given religion. I think that's another important core message here in Proof of Heaven and Map of Heaven, is this is about all of humanity and rising above those false boundaries that tend to separate us. And that includes the boundary between science and religion, because, in fact, this will involve greatly expanding the boundaries of science to fully incorporate the reality of spirituality and of our spiritual essence that we all are. And also to rise above the false boundaries of the various religions. So it's not a question of, well, do you check off, I believe in God, or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, all the above, none of the above. No. The reality of that loving infinite God at the core completely transcends the little petty bickering about dogmatic differences here between the various religious faiths. And I think that religions are very valuable in so much as they teach the original message of the prophets of love and compassion, forgiveness, and mercy. When they separate from that and start proposing, separatist dogma, that we're different and separate and that we're actually at odds with each other, then obviously you have dysfunctional humans who have twisted and distorted the teachings of the prophets to gain some power over humans in this material world. And to that extent, any part of a religion that puts out that separatism and that we are at odds with other religious faiths, we're better than the others, then that's all false. That does not work. And that is something that religion will have to let go of, because it's not part of the original teachings of the prophets. And this is all about unification and coming together. It's not about an ongoing, perpetuation of this false sense of separation.
Exactly. And I think that even kind of sums up what we're seeing happen in our world right now, where it appears that there's a maximum division and separation going on around the world in cultures and societies, but it's actually because we are waking up, and really the old structures are falling apart, and we're waking up to this new higher consciousness. We just have to hang on while we go through this process together.
Well, I think it's actually inevitable. I'm very optimistic about where the world is headed now, and it has to do with this awakening and also realizing that love, that compassion, that light is overwhelming and infinitely powerful. As we all serve to be conduits for that light and love, bringing the unconditional love of the Creator through our being for ourselves and our fellow loved ones and for all fellow beings in this world, there is no way that forces of darkness and of evil can overpower that love. The more we all serve to bring that love into this world, the more it will fill this world. And of that I am quite certain, and that's why this awakening is happening now. It's because we really don't have an option to go forward pretending that the status quo of the 20th century, with all the warfare and destruction of the ecological systems and the polarization of economic resources. I mean, this is about all of us taking care of all of us, being there for the least, the last, the lost. This is about this world waking up and sharing the beauty and love and compassion and forgiveness of that Creator for all of this creation. And I know that awakening will be taking this world into a beautiful realm of harmony and of forgiveness and love and compassion, unprecedented in our history. And it's because we don't have a choice to keep pretending that the hatred and animosity and warfare, especially of the 20th century, was in any way part of moving forward in this world. And this is what we have to bring to all beings in this world.
Well, I think it's a perfect message for us to end our conversation on, that it's really up to each one of us to be a conduit for that unconditional love in our own world, in our own lives, in any way that we possibly can. And I want to thank you so much, Dr. Alexander, for the work you've done, your writing, your speaking, and just for having the courage to speak out and bring this beautiful message to the world. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I tell you, to me, the biggest gift is the gift that I received by sharing this love. I mean, it comes back to us a million times over. So for each and every one of you out there, just remember, this is how the love comes to us. It's simply by serving as a conduit and sharing it out to our fellow beings. And the rewards are beyond imagination.
That's beautiful, and that's a beautiful way to close our talk for today. So I've been talking with Dr. Eben Alexander, author of Proof of Heaven and Map of Heaven, and I encourage you, if you haven't read those books, to get them and read them now, and also go to his website, ebenalexander.com. So thank you, Dr. Alexander, and thank you to everyone listening today. I'm glad you've been able to join us and share in this important conversation. And remember to be the love wherever you go. Thank you.
And thank you so much for having me. God bless you all.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Eben Alexander, and take a look at his books, Proof of Heaven, Map of Heaven, and he also has a new book coming out as well. And so I'll be back again with another interview in the very near future, and until then, take care. Bye-bye.